Hello everyone, I am Anushri Sharma from the editorial team of People Matters and a very warm welcome to this exciting virtual live session. Continuing with our endeavor to provide actionable thoughts to the community, People Matters in partnership with Indeed.com brings to you this exciting session on maximizing employer brand to maximize engagement. And today, we have the pleasure of joining with us today Harshvendra Soin. Harshvendra is a gold medalist in personal management and industrial relations from University Business School, Chandigarh, and has recently won the prestigious CHRO of the Year award at the World HRD Congress Business Leader of the Year award. He has over 26 years of experience in Indian and multinational companies and currently heads the human resources and marketing function as Global Chief People Officer and Head Marketing at Tech Mahindra Limited. Welcome, Harsh. It's great to have you on board with us today.
Thank Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Harsh. Now, moving on to our next speaker, we have Rohan Sylvester, who is a recruitment evangelist at Indeed India, an experienced content creator with over 11 years of experience across verticals. Rohan has demonstrated history of working in the content industry. Combining his passion for content, data-driven insights, and recruitment technologies, he is able to provide companies with actionable strategies to enhance their recruitment. Welcome on board, Rohan. It is always a pleasure to host you.
Thank you, Anushi. Great to be here. And I just want to say congrats to Harsh for winning that CHR of the Year award.
Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect. So now a quick housekeeping before we start today's session. If you have any question during the session, please feel free to use the chat window. Our experts will answer them as uh, as as we move towards the end of the session during the 15 minutes reserved for the Q&A. So now, before I invite Harsh and Rohan to share their expertise on the topic, we have created a quick poll to understand how critical the employer brand is today for the organizations. So please log on to menti.com and enter the code 81421357 to access the poll. So may I please invite my team to share the poll on the screen? I again repeat, to participate in this poll, just log on to www.menti.com and use the code 81421357 as you can see on the screen. The question is, how do you see the importance of employer branding emerging as hiring and attracting quality candidates undergoes a new set of challenges? So let's just spare 1 minute for this poll as people are have started to join us and they are logging on to this platform and participating in the poll. And as we can see, the numbers are rising towards very significant and so I can see that employer branding is a priority for us, for organizations in the new normal. Perfect. So, Harsh and Rohan, as we can see that employer branding is an emerging priority, and our audience feel that it is very significant when we look into the situation that we are in today. So, Harsh, let's start with you. You know, a lot has happened over the last year, which has completely changed the perspective of how employees or the candidates see an organization as a great place to work. So, what do you think are the key factors that have changed the way candidates or employees see the value of working in a firm? And maybe the second part of this question could be, how do you plan to sustain these experiences in the new normal?
No, thanks. A wonderful question. I'm always reminded of what Mary Angelou said. She said that people will forget what you said. People will also forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And actually, in the pandemic has shown us clearly that this is the time for organizations to act. In the post-pandemic scenario, the well-being, psychological safety, and purpose and meaningful work will take center stage. we've also clearly seen that in the new normal, there are certain non negotiables that have arrived. One of them clearly is holistic well being, beyond the physical into the mental and emotional and even social well being, uh, which has translated into hyper personalization beyond the workplace and beyond the office hours. Gig working is something that's come up in a big way, and that's actually made people think on and brands think about resilient org design. And of course, upskilling, employability, and workplace optionality, which means work from anywhere, is going to be key for great employer branding. Now, there is obviously no magic sauce for organizations to thrive in the pandemic, but the only secret ingredient that I would say is that we have to act according to our culture and values. And culture is not what you do with to your employees. It's also what you do with them. And therefore, in the post-pandemic scenario, we clearly saw organizations that reacted to save lives, organizations that reacted with a purpose, organizations that reacted from their own self beyond, I think mattered. At TechM, as I was talking earlier, we've opened five quarantine plus centers. They're actually hospitals along with hospital chains. We have completed vaccinations for almost most of our employees, whether it's medicines, injections, and obviously oxygen. We have done a lot of work. We're actually getting about 20 PSA plants, about 10,000 cylinders. We've partnered with two NGOs, three NGOs actually. One is, of course, the TechM Foundation through our Oxygen for Life and Mission Oxygen. And we are looking at taking care of our employees. We are looking at taking care of their families, relatives, friends, and also the community. We have come up with a policy. If there is a mortality due to COVID, there is a host of benefits that we give to the next of kin or the family members, including providing jobs, including preparing them for or upskilling them for jobs, and including making sure that the kids have education paid for. So a lot has happened. On the other side, the touchless experiences for employees to come to the office and to interact with what they used to do is important. Whether it's our facial recognition system for attendance, whether it's mHealthy. mHealthy is a solution that we had, which is COVID assessment tool, which is 98% accurate, or it's our humanoid K2, which could answer all queries of people during the pandemic, or many other things. There's training tools, there is voice enabled recognition, there is a book my seat app, which is really when you come to office, in case you do need to come to office, you don't have to wander around looking for your seat. So I think today, if we have to remain a good brand, no longer a large company with large revenues is enough. I think what you have to do is to impact people, impact their families, and impact communities. What we've really seen is great employers or great brands have gone beyond the self and helped communities. When this whole pandemic hit and everything was locked down, even today, and the government decided to say, okay, fine, you can take some passes, but nobody knew how to create those passes. So we partnered with the government in Delhi for the e-pass system, and therefore a lot of companies did that, and I think that's the key, to be with a company with a purpose, and to be a company that goes beyond self. So back to you,
Sure.
Arvind. Anushi.
Thanks, Harsh. Thanks for sharing that. I can see care, flexibility, trust are the key emerging factors that is driving candidates to see that value and trust in that firm. So, coming back to you, Rohan, you have been working with a lot of clients, helping them stitch their recruitment strategies. What's your view on this?
Well, I think Harsh put it really well, right? When the crisis hit, a couple of things happened. Job star seekers' priorities shifted, and post which, right, once they started noticing things. And some of the important things that really came to the forefront was how were companies taking care of their employees, and what were companies doing at large to sort of take care of society as well. They want to know that there not only is there going to be an impact only on their employees, but that larger impact, because at as you can see around us, particularly with the second wave, society needs help from time to time, and organizations are uniquely placed to sort of give that, and it gives employees a sense of connection, sense of alignment, and for new job seekers who are looking at companies, knowing what a company can do for their own society, right, can be of immense value to help them take that final decision. Because, like, owing to the pandemic and remote working, employees have been given the flexibility to define how they work, manage their hours, responsibilities as it suits them best. Things are changing as we speak. Not only when you think about it from a new job seeker's perspective, we are also thinking about it from an existing employer's perspective as well, right? And one really interesting thing is, there have been a lot of interesting changes that the pandemic has brought. It's mainly majorly a change in employee mindset, right? Like, things that were not that important before have suddenly gained in importance, and things that were important have kind of dropped. For example, a lot of employer branding efforts that we used to see in the past, prior to COVID, was a lot of talk about the facilities, the campuses, the company, the office space, the physical, the tangible things that you would get by working for the organization. But one thing that the crisis has shown is these things have fallen by the wayside. The more important things are, what can the company do to support in times of crisis? What can the company do to take it to the next level? So yes, to answer your question, the the values that they are looking at from a company have changed a little bit, but the thing that has stayed the same is that job seekers are still looking for organizations with similar values. And right now, it just seems that all the values are aligning in a similar way about how they take care of their employees.
Sure, sure. Like you said that change is happening as we speak, and so does our employer branding strategy needs to change, and so is our EVP. So, Rohan, continuing with the conversation on employer brand, I'm sure like we actually saw the results on the poll that employer branding is very significant in today's time, and I'm sure every most companies have their own tailor-made strategy when it comes to employer brand. But I feel that it is equally important to communicate that brand right to candidates out there. So how can we communicate our employer brand in a right way that really attracts candidates?
Okay. I can't stress enough how important it is for companies to, at present, review and update their employer brand. It's just as important, and when you're reviewing and updating other business strategies based on all the internal and external factors that are at play right now. Right? One thing we need to realize is now the internet has leveled the playing field. Gone are the days when you could wow candidates with an in-person perks, great office spaces. So any organization has the opportunity to showcase a brand story that is compelling, attractive to job seekers, just as any of the other top companies across the globe. Right? It's a level playing field, regardless of the size of the company. You can showcase what makes you great. Particularly when I said in my earlier answer how values are shifting slowly, right? The things that matter are similar across all organizations. So, with employees working from home, job seekers are increasingly researching their next employer online. If your brand story is outdated, not in keeping with the current scenario, or worse yet, if you have negative reviews that have been left unaddressed, then your employer branding is definitely going to take a hit. Now, to your question about communicating a brand story, I say there are a few things you need to keep in mind. When you're telling your story, it needs to be meaningful, it needs to be authentic, and it needs to be real. I think in this day and age of excess content, as I say, there is no shortage of content to consume in on the internet. People are becoming very savvy. They are savvy to what we would call marketing speak, right? Like, where you're just promoting. But what they are looking for is authentic. And that's what it matters. So you want to be meaningful, where you convey who you are and why your company matters, bringing your mission and core values to the forefront and showing how you work towards a purpose. This is inspiring to a lot of candidates and will help them get behind your company, right? Then you've got your authenticity that comes a lot through your reviews, your peer reviews, feedback like on Glassdoor. They go a long way in showing real life experiences of working at a company. Your biggest and most untapped brand resource is your own employees, right? Get them, you can help get their help in sharing your authentic and real life experiences. And I know there's a little overlap with authentic and real, but when I say real, what I mean, it's about honest experiences. Even when the company is sharing what it is like to work there, it should be as real and honest as possible. Whether it's about the flexibility your company offers or the support you provide for their health and safety, and all of these other things, right? It, these are some of the three things. I'm sorry, these are just some of the things an organization can do to sort of communicate an authentic and great employer brand and an effective one. But I think there are three very important things. Like if you want a place to start, meaningful, authentic, and real is a good place to start.
Definitely, Rohan. I mean, in the internet world, and when social media has completely taken over the millennials and the upcoming generation, I think communication matters. And the best key takeaway is just be authentic and honest. Uh, Harsh, coming back to you, like you mentioned, values and culture plays an important role. And for candidates today, there is an equal commitment to D&I, which plays a which is as important as pay and benefits. And further, as we were talking about how the last year has shaped our focus due to different challenges and areas, among which we also see that D&I was the most talked about areas, and how organizations are quickly streamlining their recruitment focus into D&I. So how we can weave D&I into the employer brand?
No, very good point again, Anushri. And all I can say is while the pandemic has been a social calamity, it's been actually a blessing or a boon for gig working and DNI, because now you can actually have and hire people from anywhere around the globe, even people who are part-time workers, etc. And clearly, and us for us in TechM, diversity and inclusivity is not only a good thing to do, but it's a business imperative, right? And we use it because diversity, for example, diversity of thought, uh, brings in innovative solutions, which are really so important for our customers and to have that competitive edge. So, diversity and inclusivity has been huge. We have been at the forefront of, experimenting, forefront of doing affirmative action, because no longer is it okay to be neutral. No longer is it okay to say, all right, right, if things happen, it's great. You have to have affirmative action. And at Tech Mahindra, what we say is we are intentionally diverse and globally inclusive. And it's no strange thing that we do that, because we are in 105 countries and we have 125 nationalities that work for us. So, really, diversity is a key business proposition for us. But if you look at how to create that inclusive workforce, it is not about a single act of institutionalization, but a culture where it's more about consistent experiences that people feel about inclusion. And let me talk about some of the things that we do on gender. We have we have taken many initiatives, and we don't talk about two genders, we talk about three. Yeah, policies are based on three genders. We have our infrastructure, for example, gender neutral washrooms, etc. Are there. We have programs like Junior Tech Mighty, FAME, WLP, or Women's Leadership Program, which really aim at the gender diversity and how do we encourage that. The second part is about abilities. We run a Smart Plus Academies, which really hone people with disabilities or people who are differently able to give them jobs. When we look at generation diversity, we have things like Shadow Board, CEO, Young CEO program, 1,000 Leaders program, a large reverse mentoring tool, almost 7,000 reverse mentors, youngsters who tell old fogies like me on how to sort of be more agile. Just because we are in so many countries and deal with so many cultures, the diversity of culture, the diversity of belief, and the diversity of speak in the socio-economic area is massive. But I want to bring your attention to how we created the diversity of cobots and humans living together. And you've all heard of our humanoid called K2, but we believe the future is for companies which create diversity of humans and cobots living together. And all our touchless experiences, whether it's K2, whether it's UO, that's our chatbot, is a live example of the fact that at Tech Mahindra we believe that diversity doesn't have to be only restrictive, but in a sense, it should give you freedom to explore. And we are a company that has more than 12 or 13 LGBT communities which are active, and we're very proud about it. We are then one of the best companies for women to work, from great places to work. We won the Avatar and Working Mothers Awards 4 times in a row. We have been recognized for diversity and inclusivity externally. And the reason why we are proud is that our customers, our employees, and all our stakeholders recognize this as a differentiator. And I think we'll always we'll always say our affirmative action towards being diverse, that is intentionally diverse and globally inclusive, will always be a differentiator.
Great,
Back to you, Anika.
great. Thanks, Harsh. I really like the point where you mentioned that diversity need not to be restrictive, but as a human, you need to have that freedom to explore. I think that's the very right messaging for DNI. Rohan, back to you. What are your thoughts around this?
About weaving diversity and inclusion into employer branding, it's a critical part, right? Because diversity is extremely important for job seekers, particularly if they are from a historically marginalized group. In fact, according to a recent study we have done at Indeed, about 74% of job seekers think it's important for them to work at a company that prioritizes diversity and inclusion. And that's there for many reasons.
I think we lost Rohan.
No, no. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can hear
Rohan.
you.
I think
Ah.
yeah, perfect.
So the diversity of an organization is like a mirror into the organization's culture, how accepting it is of differing view. Basically, by having diversity and showcasing it to employers, you create a culture that job seekers know would foster respect, right? And they know when they want to join your organization that they would feel valued and safe, and they'll be able to share their opinions. And just by being authentic, they'll tend to be happier, and happier people are much better for your organization. You need to showcase your diverse workforce, whether it's women, whether it's LGBTQ plus employees, people with disabilities, people of all ages, and also from various backgrounds, right? Diversity of thought is also a huge important thing. If you can show how important diversity is to you as an organization, it can be a big boost when you're attracting talent. And just to show you how important it is, now the ratings and review site Glassdoor last year, just in October of last year, introduced a new category which asks employees, right, to rate how diverse and inclusive they feel their company is, and it's being showcased to job seekers right now. So it is an integral part of the employer branding experience because it showcases how accepting an organization is of different people of different backgrounds. And just to add something that Harsh was saying, we are in a very crucial moment. Despite the calamity, as he said, we have an opportunity. There is a lot of people who we would not consider before because they were in a different town, because they had different things that were taking priority. But now they can be considered for work, and we can build a much more diverse and inclusive, company.
Sure. Yeah, I agree completely. So, moving on to the next question, Harsh, you mentioned about gig workers and gig jobs. So, over the last year, there has been rising confidence in remote working, and its suitability has actually resulted in an expansion of gig jobs and workers further. So, how can we make our employer branding more strategic to the gig environment?
Yeah, so very clearly, uh, while I said that the pandemic has been a blessing for gig working and DNI, most organizations are grappling with the issue of how to use gig working. And secondly, how do you create employer branding with somebody who works with you for, let's say, 3 hours a day or 3 days a month? And it's very different from, what we used to have contractor working. That's different because here you're looking at the topmost talent, that's niche talent from anywhere around the world, and it doesn't need to be sitting in India to helping you get that sustainable differentiator. So gig working, we realized very early on, is definitely something that not only is the future, but it's here already. And we use gig working in a large way. But what's important here, and I must talk about it, is that we have actually a company that we have spun off, which is called Be Gig. That organization is about freelancing. You can register, and then if you are a freelancer, you can register there, and if you want freelancing or freelancers, you can actually grab from there. We currently have about 30,000 people who have registered, and we will soon going into we'll touch 100,000 number very soon. But remember, these guys are delivering projects that are cutting edge technology in the area of AI, data analytics, cloud, blockchain, security. So this is not something that you would go and hire otherwise because they are not available really. Again, the fact that what gig working enables is what I said, freedom to explore. It enables us to hire back retired professionals. It enables us to hire back women returning to the workforce. It enables us to hire back people who are laid off from their work. And therefore, that itself gives a huge impetus to employer branding. Imagine if there are two employers which are similar, and one gives complete flexibility and one is like a rudimentary 9 to 5 job. It's clear that the one that's giving more flexibility will win. Again, it's a win-win situation for the organization. If you look at it from the organization's point of view, clearly there is cost implications, there is effectiveness, and there is ability to get talent which otherwise in India doesn't exist for me, for example, or would not come to me just because the person doesn't want to work 12 hours a day for 365 days a year. And therefore, a true sustainable advantage on employer branding and talent acquisition for companies would be those who actually recognize gig working. And I can tell you, Anushri, I can't tell you how important this one aspect of talent would be in the future because it gives work-life balance. And there are niche talent. We work with some niche talent who work for 4 months and travel for the rest of the 8 months because that's what they want to do. If it was a normal job contract, I would never be able to hire them. And these are people who are very, very niche and very expensive. But 4 months impact is equal to probably a year's impact of somebody else. So I think you touched upon a very, very important topic, and I would urge organizations and people functions to look at gig working in a really big way if they want to sustain or if they want to improve their employer brands. Back to you.
Thanks, Harsh. That was a really great insights. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Rohan, coming back to you, what are your views around it? Rohan, you are on mute.
Sorry, thank you. As Harsh was saying, the gig economy is going to be an integral part of the future in many ways. And as he said, until now, our understanding of gig has been very low skill, things that we're thinking. But yes, as he said, increasingly there's going to be this high skill need for thing. And it's going to be highly competitive, right? So at the end of the day, it's still competition for talent when you're looking at gig workers. But what happens in this situation is candidates have a little bit more power than ever before to kind of scrutinize and select the companies they want to be to work for, especially if they have the skill sets, they fill that niche requirement, they have a lot of choice. And if you can't deliver what they're looking for, they have the capability, resources, flexibility to find an employer that will. So, which becomes, so when you start looking at employer branding for gig workers, it's not something you can ignore. It's a little different, but it's something that needs to be looked at. And I think that's where the future is going. It's going to be highly competitive. It's going to be highly competitive. And 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 it's going to be highly competitive. from what you would do for full-time employees, but it is still an important one. It might become a little bit more tactical. For example, some of the things that gig workers are looking for could be around trust from their leadership. They're looking at the values of the company, which is similar. And most importantly, they want to see that your organization has a flexibility to accommodate what their needs are. So employer branding can be a great way to highlight the positive of gig opportunities, and also it's not something you can ignore.
Definitely. Completely agree on this point. Rohan, so I'll stay with you. And earlier we had a conversation around how do we really communicate employer brand. Now, data is something that has over the last few years has emerged as a go-to tool to keep track of our, the goals, the outcomes. So I would also want to understand how can we use data to communicate employer branding efforts and leverage it to accelerate our branding outcomes?
Thanks, Anushri. That's a great question, and it's a really important one, because employer branding is many times viewed as a very vague thing, a very intangible thing. But there are tangibilities to it. There are things you should be tracking, and there are data points you should be keeping an eye on. There are a few ways to look at it. First, right, you have to look at where your employer branding kind of lives, and then look at the numbers around that. So, where does your employer branding typically lives on your career site, right? And some of the things you would look at over there are the number of people who are visiting your site, the number of people who are applying to your site, where are they coming from. In fact, I'm looking at the audience questions, and I think Anshul has asked this question. Anyway, we can measure employer branding. So these are some of the things you should be tracking, Anshul, like on your website, where are people coming from, what are they looking at, are they applying? So how many people out of the visitors are applying? If 20 people are coming to your career site and only one is applying, there seems to be an issue. Maybe there is some sort of things you must be considering, right? And then when you look at the hub, then you have to look at the spokes, right? The channels that are bringing in. You have employer branding sites and employer branding solutions and channels like Glassdoor, like Indeed also has, and you have social media. When it comes to Indeed and Glassdoor, you can track a lot of things, because you can track the number of people visiting your page, you can track the number of people who are following you, you can track the number of people who are signing up, say, to a newsletter. All of these things matter, because every time someone interacts with your company in company's employer branding, it is an opportunity, right, to convince them to apply to your organization. So if we are not tracking this and we are not seeing a conversion, we don't know if the employer branding is working or not. So if you put out a set of messaging on, say, a Glassdoor, which is an employer branding channel, and don't track it, you don't know if that employer branding messaging is working at all. But for example, if you put out that messaging, you track that about 1,000 people are visiting that page, but only 500, or sorry, maybe only 100 are going on to apply. Then you can start looking at ways to improve that messaging to get that 10% up and up and up. And you can't do that without tracking the numbers. Of course, it takes time, it takes effort, and it might even need someone dedicated to look at this, right? Then you can start looking at the number of people who are following your organization on these pages. And it gives, and even in social media can give you very quick insights into what messaging works. You put out a tweet or a Facebook post about, say, a specific benefit, right? It could be about compensation, and then you put out another messaging which could be around your CSR activities. See the ones that get the most reactions, see the ones that get more likes. It will let you know, right, what is important to the job seeker, or what is important to the people who are following you. You can't do any of this. You can't fine tune your messaging. You can't improve your messaging. You can't get your applications up. You can't do all of this without doing some form of tracking, right? You have to keep those numbers in mind. Reviews, ratings, all of that play into that. And at the same time, you can also compare yourself with talent, right? You can, with your talent competition. Some of these employer branding solutions like Glassdoor and Indeed allows you to actually look at how you're doing versus the other person. And it starts giving you greater insights into what you can be doing. So there is a lot you can be tracking depending on what channel you're using, where your hub lives, where your employer branding is seeing exposure to job seekers, and you can use all of those numbers to sort of get a better handle on what works and what doesn't. Now, that being said, a lot of organizations are still lagging when it comes to tracking these things. And I think there's an old proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. So if you haven't been doing it now till now, it's fine. You can start today, and hopefully you can see some results.
Thank you. Thanks, Rohan, for sharing that. Harsh, I remember we had a conversation early last year on how Tech Mahindra is leveraging analytics into different areas of people function. Would you want to share some examples or suggestions from Tech Mahindra on leveraging data and analytics on accelerating branding outcomes?
Yeah, thanks. And I would say that data is the new fuel, right? But it's actually more than that. It's one is to get data, and second is to make sense of data, and then act on data. And most of the things that we've seen in the past, especially 10 years ago or 5 years ago, those once a year surveys where you get data and then you make an action plan, no longer are effective today. Today, you need real time data, real time impact, and then every single like or a comment on social media actually builds or destroys your employer brand. Let me start by telling you an example of what I said earlier too. When we decided to do away with all these ID cards and stuff, and we want to create a huge experience for our employees, we call it a human experience, and it's all also that also depends and is enabled by technology and data. And we say we use a high we create a high touch environment by using high tech. Now, the moment you look at the facial recognition tool recognizes you, but also recognizes 8 moods, and therefore, not for an individual, but for a location, on a real time basis, I know the mood and I can take action there and then. And therefore, I know there's a blip in Hyderabad, there's a blip in London, I would investigate instantly. So, no longer it's data, but it's data in real time. Secondly, all the other social media, whether it's Indeed or Glassdoor, Facebook, Mouthshut, give me data, but also tell me what I need to improve. And if I'm not accessing them and analyzing them, the inputs that I get, well, and the most important is every single movement on social media. Earlier, employees used to, fret and fume and, write letters. Now they go on social media. I mean, you have to monitor, you have to respond, and it's a completely new way of living, because brands are built by years and they can get destroyed very quickly. And therefore, how responsive you are on the data that's generated. And data means it could be sentiment, it could be emotion, and especially in the pandemic, uh, you can't talk about things which are not contemporary. You can't talk about things which are not impacting people on their minds today. Imagine when people are suffering and you talk about completely different, whether it's profit or how well your company is done, it makes no sense. So data and information and feedback has to be analyzed. Once it has to be received and received real time. And there are enough tools today, enough technology today that makes it happen real time. Second, has to be analyzed and acted upon. Otherwise, it's a lot of data is also useless, because a lot of us get entangled by heaps of data, and we don't act. And the third thing that I would say is, so one, get data real time, analyze the data and make sense of it, but action has to be immediate. If you are waiting for a year to action something that's happened a year ago, well, you've lost the battle already. So data has become hugely impactful, because even while you're doing talent acquisition, it's not that candidates are coming not knowing about your company. They know everything. They go through your investor calls, they go through your quarterly results, they go through your social media. So it's not what you say to them, it's what you do and the experience you generate while they are in an interview and prior and post. So I can't emphasize how important data has become today. And whether you're an IT company or a non-IT company makes no difference. Whether you have 10 people working on data doesn't make a difference. But data too has moved from historical to predictive. Today, you have to use the sense that you are getting from the field and in real time and actually also do predictive analysis. So, attrition, for example. No point in lamenting after the, you're hit by attrition and you've done nothing. You no point in lamenting if suddenly people are hundreds of people are going on Glassdoor and commenting if you've not done anything and if you've not predicted it. So I think it's a complex message that I'm giving, that you need data, you need real time data, you need to act on data, and you need to make sense of what that data means for you in real time. So those are the aspects that I would say if you have to really build a good and robust employer brand.
Sure, thanks, Harsh. I think that's a great takeaway that you don't really need data, but you really need to act upon data and make sense out of it. Thanks for sharing that, Harsh. So, Harsh, as we move to closing this session and get back to the Q&A from our audience, you shared some really wonderful examples of Tech Mahindra and some really inspirational ones. So, if we have to sum up the journey and your employer branding goals, where do you think at which stage you are at achieving these goals and what more is required?
I think challenges are every day, because as we joke in today's time, if competition is not changing things, then the government is, or in the environment is. So everything is changing. It's very dynamic, and even our policies have to live up to it. It have to keep changing. They have to be dynamic and alive. You can't have reams of paper. Secondly, I think the challenge of communication. The challenge of communication is, earlier you used to send memos and notice boards and emails. Nobody looks at them. Your communication has to be very different, has to be empathetic. And today, your universe is beyond the employee into the families, because remember, it's work from home and work at home. So there's almost a double shift fatigue that's happening. Similarly, a great employer is not 9 to 5. You have to partake in the family's life after the person has gone home. So, for example, a kid needs admission. Are you an employer that provides it? If the wife needs employment, are you an employer that provides, or a brother, or if your brother is unwell in the times of pandemic, have you taken care of the extended family? So it's very interlinked and challenges are plenty. So I think for us at Tech Mahindra, the message that I always give is we cannot be complacent even for a minute. And you are only as good as today, because people have short memories, and you have to constantly be reiterating to your folks that we have a good employer and we have to live with it. But the last message, and somebody asked that question I think on the chat also, is it's not people function that drive employer branding. It's the leadership, and then everybody down. It's not the job of a people function or an HR function at all. Neither it's a marketing function. It's about leadership intent. And therefore, unless the leadership has bought into this intent, the challenge will always happen. So challenges are plenty, Anushri, and we all have to be, aware of them and be agile in our responses.
Definitely, and I think that's a great message that employer branding is not only the own is not only HR is not accountable for that, but leadership and everyone within that organization is accountable for those efforts. So that's a great takeaway. And now let's move on to the questions by our audience, because we have got received a lot of questions. And maybe the first question is again, how important is to have a dedicated employer branding manager, and what should they be in charge of?
Uh,
Sorry, go ahead, Ron. You want to take that?
Sorry, I just wanted to add. So what Harsh was saying is perfectly right, and it kind of answers this question as well, right? It's everyone is accountable for employer branding. It's if everyone thinks employer branding is just the one team's responsibility, it's going to be a lost cause. But that being said, to answer sort of Priya's question, Of course, it depends on company to company, right? There are large organizations that have dedicated employer branding teams. There are smaller, mid-sized organizations that don't. The way we see it is that uh, it is every company's responsibility. And to show you how important people feel it is, there was a recent, not a recent, sorry, there was a study done on employer branding where we asked CEOs, who do you think should own it? And then we asked HR teams, who do you think should own it? And you ask marketing teams, who do you think it should? CEOs overwhelmingly felt it was marketing, HR teams overwhelmingly felt it was them, marketing teams felt it was CEOs and marketing. So it was, firstly of all, there are differing opinions within organizations. So, but what our opinion is, I think everyone is involved because they have skill sets. Marketing has a skill set to build out the tangible things you need to build out a great employer branding. CEOs, the leadership are an integral part of it because they represent the organization, and there is no bigger visibility into a company than through its leadership. But HR is the one that sort of gains or loses as a consequence of that. So I know I'm not really answering Priya's question. I think having a dedicated employer branding manager can help, right? It can help in coordinating all of these different organizational facets that need to get in together to work that. So it might help, but of course some companies can't afford to have a dedicated, in which case maybe someone's responsibility should be there to sort of be that go between to make sure everyone is aligned at the very least. So there is value in doing that, and it sort of answers some of these other questions as well. And think over to you, Harsh. Sorry.
Yeah, so slightly different opinion. See, my point is, and Priya, this is for you. See, a one person, imagine a company like ours. We have 130,000 people spread across 105 countries. Even if I have 10 of them, I don't think it will make a difference. Every single person on the ground interfacing with the customer, every single person in the recruitment team interfacing with a possible candidate is your employer branding manager. What companies need to do is to have processes. And I can tell you, use of technology can't be underestimated in this whole pandemic or overestimated in the whole pandemic area, because you have to use technology for consistency and efficiency of experiences. A lot of people have asked me, we've hired so many people. How the hell do you manage your induction experience? And for us, actually, the induction experience has gone up because, through technology, we've given them the same experience through your AR, VR headsets and, your blockchain, letters going through blockchain, and really the whole AI tool tech telling us about what the person is expecting, because the data again is so much available. The mining of social media, when you're getting to a candidate or candidate is getting to us, makes a lot of difference. So I think my suggestion is you can have people who are looking at it from an analytics point of view or a strategy point of view, and you can call them brand managers or whatever. But ultimately, if you have to be successful, make sure that the person on the ground who's interfacing with the customer, interfacing with your candidates, is your manager. And if that person understands what your value proposition is, and your culture, it's easier to explain. We defined our culture statement in one line, and that everybody can repeat. And we made it so simple for people to know what we stand for and what we don't. And I think that's the challenge, that sometimes we confuse ourselves when we talk about these software issues.
Sure. In fact, Harsh, you just mentioned that the role of technology here cannot be overestimated or underestimated, and we have to use technology. So the second question is from Pratik: what kind of digital tools or technology that he or the organization can use to help support these efforts in employer branding and social media?
There are plethora of tools. I mean, it doesn't make a difference what you do, as long as you have two things. Listening is number one. Listen. So many tools of listening wherever it's happening, right? And you have multiple modes where you get the feedback from. Second, understanding on how to handle a crisis, which means sensitivity training on handling a crisis. Because when a crisis hits, on a social media, 90% of people don't know who to go to, how to react to it, and they end up making some statement which could be really even worse for the employer brand. Second thing, third is obviously communication to make sure you learn from everything good or bad that you get on social media, and therefore many tools. It doesn't make a difference what tools you use. And I want to make a point, Pratik. None of what we are saying is expensive. None. In fact, most of the AI tool and the RPA tools that we use are actually cheaper than even one human being doing this role. For example, our attendance system used to have 10 or 12 people. Now we use zero, and it's error free, and it's actually less than a cost of one human being. So it's not expensive, the tools you use, but it's important that it is real time, and you have these three things on how to react, how to listen, and then how to communicate.
Sure. Harsh, coming back to you, what would be your suggestion?
So you meant Rohan, I think. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Sorry. So yes, from Harsh, I said I think answered it really well. There are a lot of tools out there. I just want to add, of course, apart from listening you need to use certain tools to sort of get your messaging out there as quick as possible. Keep on track on of have messaging that is ready to go when there's changes, and also make sure it gets out there really well. And to add to what Harsh was saying, he's right. The tools available are not cost prohibitive in any way. There are even free tools that can help you share a very powerful employer brand with job seekers, right? It exists. So there are a lot of things that they could potentially use to do that. Listening, surveys, which part of the listening, as well as automation tools to sort of share all this messaging when they need to. Things like that can help, and it's all accessible quite easily nowadays.
sure. Thanks, Rohan, for sharing that. So, coming on to the Arpita's question, and it's very interesting. So, Rohan, I'll start with you first. Indeed, as an organization, would have been working with a lot of clients, with a lot of organizations stitching that recruitment campaigns. So, do you have any experience or any example that you would want to share in this entire journey of yours, where you would have find some campaigns around recruitment market, and if you could suggest some of the tips, what should we do more, and add more to it.
Okay, it's a great question and a long one, but I'll try to keep it brief, and I'll try to choose one idea that I really enjoyed. So there are a lot of recruitment marketing campaigns, and then there is the basics, right, where you got good job postings, you got good basic employer branding. But there are certain companies that go a little above and beyond. There's one very large tech company, which I saw one of their marketing techniques, part of their employer branding, was the opportunity to actually chat live with an employee. They had a chat system in place, where I think employees take turns manning that system, or they sign up to be a part of it on a certain time or a certain date, and and job seekers who come to the career hub are directed to these employees and get the opportunity to sort of connect with and speak to an actual employee and ask them what it's like there. This goes to something Harsh was saying earlier about hyper personalization, and I think personalization is something that is really critical in any marketing technique, including recruitment marketing. And if you can do more of that, you're more likely to see success. It's hard to do, right? It tends to be cost. It tends to be either costly. If it's not costly, it's man intensive in some way. So any way to do a personalization, and that's why that specific campaign that this large organization had really caught my attention, because I hadn't seen anything like that before, and it was very well executed as well. The one thing I would like people to do less of is keep things generic, because that's how they were doing it in the past. Many people fail to see that the very first point of employer branding contact for a job seeker is typically a job posting. And job postings have become these humongous legacy pieces of content that haven't changed in years. please do have a look at that. I hope that trend goes away, right? We want shorter ones, which are actually talking about things that matter to job seekers, right? And that's what I'm hoping to see less of.
Sure. Thanks for sharing that, Rohan. Harsh, I mean, you are like the best combination right here, who is leading the HR and who is also leading the marketing. So, what would be your idea or your suggestion here?
No, and we did it actually. I don't know if I'm sure all of you would remember. We about 5 months or 6 months ago, when the pandemic was hit and a lot of people were losing job, came out with a full page ad in Economic Times, and we actually said we are hiring, and we are hiring big time. And the message was that you know we encourage diverse candidates to differently able candidates to come and apply. And we said we are hiring across the world, and we got a humongous response because of that time. So timing and the mode was everything. And it was a full page ad, black in color with dots. You couldn't miss it, because it was really eye catching. And people said, the strange thing is we all hearing everybody's laying off, and you said you're hiring. It's so I'm just saying sometimes when you have to go against the tide and you actually do the right thing, you get a great sense. Secondly, we said we don't care where you are. You can be sitting in Jabalpur, there's no difference for me, because it's all virtual. And the last bit we said is we are encouraging gig workers to apply. Now, what it did was people read and say, wow, these guys are doing gig working, they're doing virtual, they're doing hiring, and we had a plethora of jobs. It was just like Owen actually said, very small on the job description. He said only the skill sets are the competencies. High energy, positive, out of box thinker, young, challenge the system, are rice tenets, accepting no limits was a key tenet, right? Uh, Driving positive change, right? And I think those kinds of stuff that catch your attention is important, but has to be genuine. I must add, uh, a rice in it set alternative thinking, accepting no limits, driving positive change. Every single person believes in them. But if you put into an ad which you are not, now it's a disaster for employer branding. I think for us, we always say freedom to explore. And we always say, if you want to come and enjoy and, and thrive, and explore, what you want to do. And I always give my examples. I'm not an engineer. I ran a large business in Canada. I come back and did HR doing marketing, and it's the freedom to explore of an organization, and it's our organization that makes all the difference. So I think, uh, be genuine, be credible, and swim against the tide.
Thanks for sharing that, Harsh. A lot of examples here. There's another interesting question that we have received from Shreya. She's asking, how can we extend employer branding efforts in the social sector where resources are especially, limited, and especially in these uncertain times where they usually feel that crunch of investment, extra investment into these efforts.
And I would say that we run Tech and Foundation, and to be honest, the most powerful stories actually are from the social sector. And it's not about how much money you spend, it's about what work you've done. And at the end, when I go and say, even when I hire, I use the foundation and say, listen, we run 100 smart centers out and 100, and out of which 14 are smart plus academies for the differently abled. I run a nursing academy. For example, I'm doing nurse training for two governments, state governments today in the pandemic. Those stories are incredible. And it's not about the money you spend. Again, as I said, I will repeat, it's about credibility. It's about authenticity of message. And the social sector actually is a blessed sector. And I can tell you that all of the social sector has done so much for the community at this time. And a lot of people are actually saying, I want to actually do this because it provides me a meaningful employment and a job with a purpose. So I think I would say that social sector should only talk about what they do, and forget about the song and the dance.
Thanks, Harsh, for sharing that. Rohan, your quick view here.
Just to add to what Harsh is saying, he nailed it when he said being in the social sector, just sharing what you do as a message is very powerful because that really connects with job seekers. But coming to limited financial resources, most employer branding solutions have a free option. Most social media is free, of course, and you have a career page which also serves at that. When you think of these, the hub and that channels that we spoke about, your hub is yours. The channels are predominantly free. You have Google, you have SEO, so you to really understand what to use and how to use it. What I would say is start figuring out how job seekers find your jobs, how job seekers do research into you, and when you get an understanding of that, you'll start seeing clarity as to where you need to put any limited resources that you have in, if those resources are even needed. If you find out that your career site is the major source of all information for job seekers, then there's no question about any extra expenditure. Or if there are channels out there like Indeed or Glassdoor where job seekers are finding out, you can still respond to reviews and ratings. You can still share your story in many ways. And social media, by its very nature, is free. Of course, there are paid versions of it, but typically, if you can find where job seekers are, the job seekers you want are living online, for lack of a better word, you can typically find ways to connect with them. And most of those options tend to be quite low cost or free.
Thanks, Rohan. And I can see a lot of questions still there. However, due to the paucity of time, we would have to close the session, but we'll definitely try our experts to share the responses to those questions and we will share that offline with you. Thank you, Harsh and Rohan, for those great insights. I personally really enjoyed this session and have learned a lot about employer branding. And I'm sure that goes same with for our audience as well. Before we close, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our partner, Indeed.com, who has supported us in curating the entire session. Um, for attendees, we will soon share an employer branding report with insights to maximizing your employer brand for you to download and get access to all the steps that would require to maximize the efforts around employer branding and engagement. So stay tuned to your inbox and also do let us know your feedback on today's session by sending us your input on the link provided in the chat section. We'll always value and your feedback and suggestions, and hence would try to improve our sessions further. And with this, we close today's session. It has been a pleasure hosting you all. Have a great day and stay safe, everyone. Thanks, Rohan and Harsh.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.